They hit him 22 times, right there, middle of the street. His mom was inside. Some say she saw it all from the window. Others say she came out screaming. Either way, nobody forgets that night. Not in this part of Vegas, not in the Jets. But this ain't just about a murder. It's about the kind of city that lets something like that happen. The kind of gang that leaves that many shells behind. And the kind of silence that follows when the shooters disappear into the dark. Stick around. You'll understand why it went down like that. Las Vegas is glitter and glow if you're looking from the Strip. The slot machines never sleep, and the lights don't let you see the dark. But just 7 minutes northwest of all that, whole different story. The Sherman Gardens Annex locals call it the Jets. Wasn't where you went to win. It was where families tried to make rent, where kids played while sirens hummed in the background, and where the red flags flew for real. Built in 1965, tucked between Doolittle Avenue and H Street, this 154-unit public housing complex became ground zero for one of Vegas's most dangerous gangs, a place where dealers ran corner stores out of apartments and lookouts, posted on balconies like they were clocking in. Police cruisers rolled through but rarely stuck around. Residents knew better than to talk too loud. And the gang that ran the Jets, they weren't looking for attention. They were holding down turf. By the 2000s, this wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a stronghold. They called themselves the Playboy Bloods. And if you lived on the west side of Vegas back then, you knew better than to say that name out loud unless you had to. This wasn't some small crew tagging walls and skipping school. The Playboy Bloods were already one of the biggest black gangs in Clark County by the mid-90s. A federal study in 1996 clocked them at 670 members, more than the Gerson Park Kingsmen and Donna Street Crips combined. They weren't new and they weren't scattered. The Jets was theirs, but their influence reached far beyond that complex. Apartment by apartment, block by block, they built something structured. Not by titles or elections, but through ranks you earned. Baby G's, young G's, gangsters, and OGs. If you didn't put in work, you didn't move up. Their symbol, a red Playboy bunny. Their reputation, ruthless, especially the ones in the Full Throttle clique, an inner circle known for shootings, robbery, and turf enforcement. Guys like Marquette Ketty P. Tillman, Stephen Stevie P. Booth, and Ja'Cory Moby Taylor were names that carried weight, not just on the street, but eventually in federal indictments. And like any gang trying to hold its corner, they didn't just talk tough. They pushed crack, moved in silence, and backed it all up with firepower. M16s, handguns, whatever they could get. But when that much heat sits in one block for too long, something eventually pops. And when it did, it wasn't a rival who caught the first bullet. It was a security guard just doing his job. Sherman Gardens Annex wasn't just home to families. By the early 2000s, it had turned into a full-blown base of operations. The Playboy Bloods weren't hiding in shadows. They ran the place out in the open. The layout helped. The complex had 4 low-rise buildings, 154 units, and wide-open courtyards. Balconies overlooked every angle, perfect for lookouts. If the cops rolled up, someone up top would signal and everything would disappear before the cruiser even turned the corner. Inside, it was an open-air market. Addicts came in on foot, on bikes, sometimes even by car. Dealers set up in the stairwells, the breezeways, or from inside converted units. Apartments on Curran Street and Silverman Street were known drug spots. Some were stash houses, others served straight out the kitchen window. Residents saw it all but kept their heads down. One woman told the Review-Journal that at night, the Jets turned into a different place. Loud, dangerous. You hear gunshots, and you don't go to the window, you just wait. The Bloods had full control. Kids growing up in the annex didn't need to be told who was in charge. They saw it every day. The red flags, the gang signs, the way people moved when certain cars pulled up. Security guards posted around the property, but they weren't taken seriously. They were seen more like nosy neighbors than authority. And when one of them pushed too hard, things got tense fast. That tension would explode in January 2004. But before that, this was daily life. Cracked pavement, broken swings, and the quiet understanding that the Jets belonged to the P. The business model was simple. Move product, defend turf, don't get caught. Crack cocaine was the foundation, and the Playboy Bloods had distribution down to a system. Federal investigators later confirmed it. The gang ran multiple active drug houses inside the Jets. 1704 Curran Street, 1003 Silverman Street. Those addresses came up again and again in indictments. These weren't just hangouts. They were key spots where drugs were cooked, cut, and sold. An FBI press release laid it out plain. The Playboy Bloods were in the crack game heavy, and violence wasn't optional. It was part of the business model. If someone owed money, there wasn't going to be a payment plan. If someone disrespected the turf, it didn't end in an argument. Shootings weren't rare. According to federal affidavits, there were documented cases of Bloods opening fire on rival Crips, suspected snitches, and even cars that looked out of place. In one case from 2002, they shot up a vehicle they believed belonged to a rival set. Another time, they chased a man through the complex and fired through his car window. But it wasn't just outsiders catching heat. Even security officers working the jets were targets. One FBI document noted that gang members fired weapons at guards attempting to interfere with drug sales. That's where Brian Wilcox comes in, not as a gangbanger, not as a snitch, just a security guard doing rounds. And by January 2004, he was already on their radar. Before the bullets, before the headlines, before the courtroom testimony and victim impact letters, Brian Wilcox was just another guy trying to figure things out. He wasn't from Vegas originally. He came from Minnesota, St. Louis Park to be exact, a suburb outside Minneapolis, quiet town, middle-class roots. Nothing in his background said he was built for war zones. Brian had dreams like a lot of people who land in Vegas. His wasn't to gamble or scheme or get rich quick. He was a DJ, went by the name DJ Willie Will. Music was his thing, not just a side hobby. He was serious about it. He moved to Las Vegas thinking it would be a good career move. More clubs, more chances to get noticed, more doors to maybe break through. But dreams don't pay rent. And in Vegas, especially on the west side, survival comes first. So while he worked gigs here and there, Brian picked up a job with Guardian Security Inc. The pay was trash, just $8 an hour, but it was steady. And steady was enough to buy time until the music took off. Guardian Security was contracted to patrol apartment complexes with high crime rates. One of their biggest contracts, Sherman Gardens Annex, the Jets, the heart of Playboy Bloods territory. Now let's be real. These weren't elite guards. No squad cars, no serious protection. They were given sidearms and bicycles, yes, bicycles, then sent to patrol some of the most dangerous low-income housing in the city. Some wore bulletproof vests, but not all. In fact, Guardian didn't even issue vests to everyone. You had to buy one yourself, and only if the company thought you'd earned it based on seniority or hours logged. Brian didn't have one. Still, he took the job seriously. According to co-workers, he was professional and calm. He wasn't the aggressive type. Didn't go looking for trouble. He just wanted to make his rounds, do his job, and clock out like everybody else. But the problem is, the Playboy Bloods didn't see it that way. To them, any authority presence was disrespect, especially in their own backyard, especially in the Jets. The gang had taken over units, ran crack out of kitchens, posted lookouts on the second floor balconies. If someone got too nosy, too observant, too bold, it wasn't just a conflict, it was a challenge to the whole setup. And security guards? They got treated like rival crews. Wilcox wasn't law enforcement, but he wore a uniform and carried a radio. That was enough. Residents reported seeing security guards getting bottles thrown at them, spit on, cussed out, threatened, all part of the routine. One former guard told local reporters that confronting dealers in the Jets felt like walking into a trap you couldn't see until it was too late. Brian kept showing up anyway. Whether that was determination or just needing the check, only he could say. The job wore on him. You could see it in the messages he sent back home. He talked about the tension, how hot the place felt even when nothing was happening, how nobody made eye contact, how you could tell when a shooting was about to go down, not because you saw a gun, but because everything suddenly got too quiet. His family knew something wasn't right. His sister, Laura Wilcox, would later say she had a bad feeling for weeks. In one interview, she mentioned trying to convince Brian to leave Vegas altogether, to come back home, start over. She could tell he was stressed, tired, and not really seeing a future in the direction he was headed. But Brian felt stuck. That's what it came down to. He had bills, he had rent, and he was still holding out hope that maybe the DJ thing would pop off. Vegas was supposed to be a stepping stone, not a graveyard. He told them he couldn't leave yet. He said, "I got too much debt. I just need to get a few more things in order." It's not that he didn't want to come home. He He just felt like he had to stay a little longer. Get ahead, clear the slate. That was the kind of guy he was. Quiet, focused, didn't want to be a burden. He knew the risks, but he didn't go around talking about them. He just kept moving. Guardian Security never claimed it was a safe job, but even they couldn't have predicted what would happen next. Because come January 2004, something shifted. A confrontation went too far. Words were exchanged. A line got crossed, and by then, Brian Wilcox was too far in to walk away. January 20th, 2004, it was a Tuesday night in Las Vegas. Not a holiday, not a weekend, just another cold, quiet night on the west side. But around 9:30 p.m., things shifted inside the Sherman Gardens Annex. Brian Wilcox and his partner Gordon Boyd were on bike patrol. That night, they got a report of a disturbance near 1723 Curran Way, deep inside the Jets. Standard procedure, probably the same kind of call they got every week. But something about this one would hit different. When they rolled up, they spotted a group of young men posted up. Among them, Marquette Ketty P. Tillman and Stephen Stevie P. Booth, both known names around the complex, both associated with the Playboy Bloods, and both had already been banned from the property for suspected drug activity. Wilcox and Boyd didn't pull guns, didn't make arrests. They did what they usually did, asked the guys to leave, but the response was instant disrespect. According to court records, Tillman spit on Boyd, right there in the middle of the complex. He then allegedly threatened to kill him. That wasn't just posturing. In that environment, a threat like that, made in front of other gang members, was part of how people built and protected their rep. Backing down would mean looking soft. So the threat wasn't idle, it was about face. Wilcox and Boyd decided to fall back. No backup, no vest, no point trying to force anything. They hopped on their bikes to get out of there, probably planning to circle back with support or make a call to LVMPD. But before they could clear the block, shots rang out. Boyd said he was ahead of Wilcox when he heard the first one, then another, then a third. He turned and saw Brian collapse off his bike. He called for help over the radio. Neighbors reported hearing rapid gunfire echo through the complex. Brian was hit in the back and the leg. Witnesses said he cried out before he went down. Paramedics got to the scene fast, but the damage was bad. He was rushed to the hospital and went into emergency surgery. The next day, on January 21st, 2004, Brian Wilcox was pronounced dead. He was 29. The scene was chaotic. Residents peeked out of windows but didn't come forward. The Jets had always been a no-snitch zone. Nobody wanted to be the next target. Investigators did recover shell casings. .45 caliber, enough to match ballistics, but not enough to build a full case. Still, Boyd told them exactly what he saw. Tillman in a gray hoodie, armed, he was sure. And there was another witness, Ashley Washington, a local resident, who also reported seeing a man in gray run from the scene with a handgun. That gave police probable cause. They went to work. Wilcox's murder didn't go quiet. For once, the city noticed. Local headlines reported, security guard killed in West Las Vegas and Playboy Bloods linked to shooting. But inside the community, people weren't surprised. Sad, yes. Shocked? Not really. Security guards had been warning about this for months. They'd logged multiple reports of threats, harassment, even vandalism. Some had quit. Others stopped doing rounds in certain parts of the complex, but the danger had been brushed off as part of the job. Brian's family was devastated. His sister Laura spoke out to the press. She called it a senseless tragedy. In a later victim impact statement to the court, she wrote, "He wasn't trying to be a hero. He just went to work, and they killed him for it." Despite the pain, the case wasn't an easy one. Prosecutors had witnesses, yes, but they needed more. The shooter hadn't been caught red-handed. No weapon was recovered. And in that environment, even people who knew something kept their mouths shut. Still, police and federal agents kept digging. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, LVMPD, and the FBI's Safe Streets Task Force started connecting dots. They weren't just building a murder case, they were building a RICO case. But back in 2004, that was still years away. First, they needed to make charges stick. The DA's office filed state charges against Marquette Tillman. Boyd's eyewitness account gave them enough to move, but when the case got to trial in 2005, things got messy. Boyd, the key witness, suddenly had trouble identifying Tillman in court. Defense attorneys pushed hard on inconsistencies. Without a solid ID on the stand, the state's case fell apart. The jury found Tillman not guilty. That should have been the end of it. But federal prosecutors had other plans. They knew Tillman had been there. They believed he was involved, and under federal racketeering laws, they had another path. While the local trial wrapped up, the feds were expanding their investigation, not just into Wilcox's death, but the broader activities of the Playboy Bloods. They started connecting other crimes, other murders, and dozens of drug trafficking incidents to the same crew. They flipped insiders, they gathered surveillance, they pulled years of reports and mapped out connections. And slowly, they built the foundation for something much bigger. Back in Minnesota, Brian's family waited. His name faded from the headlines, but not from their lives. Laura Wilcox later said the waiting was worse than the loss. You think justice is coming, then it doesn't, and it eats at you. But justice in some form was on the way, the kind that takes years, the kind that brings down entire gangs, and the kind that eventually reaches back to where it all started, right there in the Jets, on a cold Tuesday night in January. By 2006, the feds weren't just watching anymore, they were moving. The FBI, along with Las Vegas Metro Police and the North Las Vegas PD, had already built a task force, the Safe Streets Gang Task Force, with one goal: dismantle violent street crews like the Playboy Bloods. And now they had a name, a pattern, and a body count. Brian Wilcox wasn't the first to die, and if something didn't give, he wasn't going to be the last. They didn't go after one shooter. They went after the whole set. Using federal racketeering laws, RICO statutes, they built a case that said the Playboy Bloods weren't just a loose group of street hustlers. They were an enterprise, organized, intentional, and criminal to the core. It took years. They pulled everything: years of incident reports, arrest records, jail calls, undercover buys, witness statements, ballistics, photos. By the end of 2008, they had enough. On October 7th, 2008, a federal grand jury dropped a sweeping indictment. 10 members of the Playboy Bloods were charged under RICO, facing allegations of murder, attempted murder, robbery, drug trafficking, and firearms violations. Some names were already familiar: Marquette Ketty P. Tillman, Stephen Stevie P. Booth, Ja'Cory Mo B. Taylor, Reginald Boley Dunlap. Others included Delvin Ward, aka D. Love, Anthony Mabry, aka Akeem Slim, Terrence Thomas, aka Seven, Sebastian Wigg, aka Rock, Fred Nix, aka June P., and D. Michael Burks, aka Mikey P. The indictment connected them to a string of crimes: the murder of Brian Wilcox on January 20th, 2004, the murder of Billy Ray Thomas on November 1st, 2004, mistaken identity, operation of crack houses on Curran and Silverman Streets, multiple armed robberies and assaults. But the key was the structure. Prosecutors argued that the gang operated with roles, ranks, and responsibilities. Younger members earned stripes through acts of violence. Older heads gave green lights and held the reins. The Jets, they said, wasn't just a location, it was the gang's headquarters. And anyone who interfered with their business, like Brian Wilcox, was fair game. From the FBI's point of view, it was about scale. This wasn't just about one murder. It was about showing how that murder fit into a larger pattern of criminal control, turf protection, and narcotics trafficking. The feds were patient. Some of the crimes dated back years, but once they had everyone lined up, the dominoes started falling. Once the indictments hit, most defendants knew what time it was. Between 2010 and 2015, nearly all 10 pleaded guilty or were convicted at trial. Let's break it down. Stephen Booth and Reginald Dunlap. In April 2013, both men pled guilty to RICO conspiracy. Booth admitted to helping with the murder of Brian Wilcox and participating in the Billy Ray Thomas killing. Dunlap admitted to involvement in Thomas's death. They each took 20-year sentences. Ja'Cory Taylor, he went to trial in September 2013. Prosecutors laid out his role in the Billy Ray Thomas shooting, along with broader gang activity. Witnesses testified, evidence lined up. He was found guilty and in October 2013, sentenced to life in federal prison. Delvin Ward, Anthony Mabry, Terrence Thomas, Sebastian Wigg, Fred Nix, D. Michael Burks, all pled guilty between 2010 and 2011 to various drug conspiracy and racketeering charges. Burks got 6.5 years, Mabry took 14, Ward got 11, Thomas received 10, Wigg and Nix each got 5. The most anticipated trial came in 2014, Marquette Tillman. Tillman had already been tried at the state level and walked free, but the feds weren't playing that game. They brought him in under RICO conspiracy and drug charges. His federal trial opened on July 28, 2014. It didn't last long. On day 2, Tillman flipped the script. He pled guilty. As part of his plea, he admitted he was present the night Wilcox was shot, admitted he was part of the confrontation, and most importantly, admitted the killing happened as part of the gang's ongoing drug operation. He also admitted to personally distributing at least 280 grams of crack cocaine during his time with the gang. In January 2015, U.S. District Judge Kent Dawson sentenced him to 23 years in prison. All told, the RICO case was a sweep. The leadership structure was taken out. The core members either got decades or flipped and cooperated. The government didn't just convict individuals, they dismantled a network. But even with convictions, the courtroom scenes were heavy, especially when it came to Brian Wilcox. During sentencing, his sister Laura submitted a written statement. She didn't hold back. She said plainly that the murder had ruined her family, that she couldn't forgive, that her brother didn't die in a shootout, but in cold blood while doing his job. The judge acknowledged the weight of the loss, but the law is the law. Sentences were handed down one by one. By 2015, the federal side had closed its chapter, and for the first time in years, Sherman Gardens was quiet, but justice doesn't bring people back. And for the Wilcox family, it wasn't closure. It was just the end of the paperwork. In Vegas, gang hits weren't exactly news. Bodies dropped on the regular, Bloods clipping Crips, Crips clipping Bloods, standard street politics. But Brian Wilcox's murder hit different. It wasn't just another gangbanger going down. Brian was regular folks, a dude just trying to clock in, clock out, and catch his paycheck. And it all went down while he was just pedaling away, doing his job. See, Wilcox was a security guard, not some rival set member. This wasn't about street beef or drug money owed. This was an average cat from Northern Cali who landed in Vegas with dreams of spinning records as DJ Willie Will. And though life had him doing the security grind at Sherman Gardens, he wasn't trying to mix it up with the locals. Dude was literally just trying to keep the peace in a housing complex that had become the Playboy Bloods drug spot. So when Marquette Ketty P. Tillman and his homie Stevie P. Booth pulled triggers that night, it changed the whole vibe. This wasn't gang-on-gang violence. This was gang-on-civilian. Vegas Metro PD and the FBI couldn't sweep this one aside like another hood casualty. They had to step up. Pressure came down hard, and the feds put eyes and ears everywhere. Brian's death became a symbol, a regular guy swallowed up by gang violence that had spiraled out of control. It woke Vegas up and flipped the script on how authorities handled gang crime in the city. No more small-time charges and plea outs. It pushed the feds to come with the big guns, the RICO Act, to finally pin down the Playboy Bloods and shake up the streets for good. But before Vegas could heal, the city had to confront the ugly truth behind the Playboy Bloods' reign. And that meant taking down the entire enterprise. After the indictments landed and the Playboy Bloods' key players got locked up, something rare happened in West Vegas. The hood started to breathe again. In 2010, the city rolled out the Safe Village Initiative, a joint effort between Las Vegas Metro, local clergy, housing officials, and nonprofit groups. They weren't just chasing gang members anymore. This time, they were trying to change the entire environment that let gangs thrive in the first place. They fixed up busted buildings, added better lighting, and opened up youth centers. Officers started walking beats, not just rolling deep in squad cars. Ex-gang members and pastors began hosting night walks through Sherman Gardens, talking to residents, squashing beef before it turned deadly. And slowly, the energy shifted. Shootings dropped, robberies fell off. Homicides, which once seemed normal in the Jets, dropped so low that for 18 months straight, not a single one happened in Sherman Gardens or the surrounding blocks. One mom said it best, "Our kids can play outside again." It wasn't perfect. The scars from years of violence don't heal overnight. But with the Bloods' grip broken and the community stepping up, the neighborhood finally got a shot at peace. Sherman Gardens, once known for crack sales, shootouts, and blood on the pavement, was turning a corner. And it all traced back to one case, one murder. That couldn't be ignored. Brian Wilcox didn't sign up for a war. He just wanted to make ends meet. But his death exposed the brutal reach of a gang that thought they ran the block. And for a while, they did. The Playboy Bloods turned a housing project into a war zone. But after Brian was gunned down, the streets pushed back. The feds moved in. The community stepped up. And one by one, the leaders fell. Today, the Jets ain't perfect, but it ain't what it was. What happened that night wasn't just another gang hit. It became the turning point, a reminder that sometimes it takes the loss of one life to bring light to hundreds more. Because in Vegas, even in the shadows, people still fight for peace, and sometimes they win.